Hi, this is Trevor from History on the Move. And I'm here with Steve Wickersham and Ross Rowland for what hopes to be a very fun interview. Let me ask you guys first and foremost, did you guys know each other before AFT1 came along?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, going back to 1968 and a family connection that goes back to the 1930s.
Yes.
Elaborate a little bit more on that.
His mother and my mother were the same Bible study group in New York City when both Helen Jackson Rowland, and my mother worked in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And then they each married Ross Rowland Sr. and my dad,
Okay.
and the family stayed close ever since.
Wow, and here I thought you guys just met on a street corner somewhere.
No,
Looking for
no.
beer.
We did meet
No.
on Wall Street when Ross hired me to go to work on the New York Commodity Exchange in 1970.
That's incredible.
Right,
He couldn't get rid of me since.
right.
And I mean, how did you two kind of get involved with Steam in general? I mean, what was the connection point to?
But, well, the answer to that question is very individual, but Steve, why don't you start out?
Ross started High Iron Company in 1966 or
Yep.
7.
66.
My brother and I and our mom were invited along on one of the first major excursions with 759 from New York City, Grand Central Terminal to Niagara Falls and back. We were invited along to be gophers. My brother and I both gophered on the train going, and I spent the entire trip back in the baggage car with the locomotive crew immediately behind the engine.
Oh, that's neat.
That was 55 years ago, about this time 55 years ago, and been at it ever since.
Wow. And Ross, when you obviously went to Striegel's, you picked up 2101. Did you already have Steve in the back of your mind as, the guy to just step in as the CMO, the mechanical guru?
Not the CMO, I was a crew member.
A crew member, okay.
Yes, yes. Steve was definitely in the forefront of my thinking as one of the most valuable members of our crew at that time. I bought the engines from Striegel in December of 1974, and we moved them in early February 1975 to the Riverside B&O Roundhouse, and under the direction of the late Bill Benson from Akron, Ohio, now deceased, Bill put a crew together of 30-some people, old guys, young guys, and they went to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and 30 days later, the engine came out under steam under her own power.
Hence the 30-day miracle.
Yeah.
Exactly. And on top of the 30 paid crew members, which included ex-B&O guys from
Right.
Grafton and all the rest, we had about 170 volunteers. So
Right.
you'd walk into that shop during the day, and people were taking time off from work to help us. People were just crawling all over that locomotive in the
Yeah.
Riverside Roundhouse.
Yeah, it was miraculous. I don't think you could ever duplicate it.
No.
I don't think so.
And what was the most challenging part of revitalizing and running 2101 for both of you? What really?
We had enough old pros with us, including one of my most favorite people in the world, Joe Carroll, guiding us, telling us what needed to be done. And then there were still steam guys from the B&O who took time off from their regular jobs to help us. The guys from Grafton, Bill, who had considerable experience by then with the 2102, we knew what needed to be done. The constraint, the challenge, was getting it done in time because we were all determined that the Freedom Train would not turn a wheel without steam.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we made it.
Yeah.
And that leads me to the next question. What is it that brought you to use steam versus, at that time, the economical diesel?
Well, two main reasons. One, most 99.9999% of the American people don't realize the critical role the steam locomotive and the railroads to run it on had to do with the settlement and growth of our nation. From 1830, before the advent of the steam engine in North America in 1830, we got around exactly as we had since before the time of Jesus Christ. Walk, horse and buggy, or sailboat, okay? Wow. And for those reasons, almost all of our people in 1830 lived on either the east or west coast or along one of the major navigable rivers, because that's the way you got around. Mm-hmm. With the advent of the steam engine and the railroad to run it on, it changed everything. Now we could go 20 miles an hour, sustained, then 30, then 50, then 70, then 100.
Right.
And most importantly, we could carry heavy tonnages of raw materials like iron ore, coal, steel, et cetera, great distances economically, which allowed the Industrial Revolution to happen and the settlement of our country to happen. So the steam locomotive played a huge critical role from 1830 to 1930 in the growth of the nation. And for that reason, I wanted to have the Freedom Train pulled by steam. And selfishly, I love steam and I love to run steam. So for my own personal reasons,
Sure.
I wanted it to be able to have fun with it.
And Steve, what was it like for you to see the 30-day miracle come to life?
Well, that was part of it. And I had already been involved from 1968 onward. I was still in high school and then early college, so I couldn't make every high iron adventure then, but I was in and out of it all along that way. And to me, coming to work for Ross in 1974, in the early planning stages, it was all about the great adventure. I've always had the travel lust, the wonder bug, the same affection and love for machines, not from a rail fan's perspective, but because I thought steam locomotives were the ultimate super toy.
Yeah.
We never treated it like a toy, but that was my original motivation. So for the opportunity to travel the country, to be involved with this railroad adventure, because I've loved steam trains since a little kid. I can remember camelbacks coming through Westfield where I grew up.
Oh, wow.
It was just an irresistible lure. I took a leave of absence from college. I was in Worcester Polytech at Worcester, Mass. in the mechanical engineering course, and I took a leave of absence to go to work on the American Freedom Train. I'd like to say I finished my bachelor's degree on the Freedom Train.
Yeah, the high iron taught you.
Well, and the AFT taught me, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's for real, because I had firsthand tutoring, too, for some exemplary people.
These old B&O guys.
Joe Carroll, Pappy Hausman, later on in Reading, Frank Katranek, one of the preeminent air brake people in the entire country, Charlie Reinhold, now passed away as well. All these men are gone now.
Yeah.
Who could ask for anything better? I mean, you learn more from those guys than just about anything else I've ever learned. And after that, it was just applying what I knew.
Right. In terms of the Chessie Steam Special, right, because that was the next reinvention, if you will, of 2101. What? Obviously, you had gotten the go ahead from. Remind me, was it William F. Howes?
Bill Howes, yeah.
Bill Howes was the one that gave you the go ahead. What, for both of you, what was that like to be able to run that? You know, obviously, until it had some issues and it had to go into the shops. But what kind of, as compared to AFT1, what type of emotions did that kind of bring out in you?
Well, it began with a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Howes came to us, to Ross, and said, we've got the 150th anniversary of the B&O coming up. We'd like to run some steam trains back and forth between Baltimore and Ellicott City, the original route of the B&O. Ross got us all together, and we came up with a plan that had 50 excursions all over the network, 3 display cars, which never did get built, and said, here you go, Bill.
And Bill took it to the boss, Mr. Watkins, the chairman. And Mr. Watkins, on many occasions, told the story publicly that Mr. Watkins put the operating executive committee together for a meeting to discuss whether they should do this system-wide steam train to celebrate their birthday. And there were 12 votes on the committee, Mr. Watkins being one of them. And the vote was 11 against and 1 in favor.
So we did it.
He was in favor, so we did it. True story. So,
And the truth is, the full truth on the whole Chessie Steam Special is it actually had 2 godfathers, Ross and Bill Howes. It would not have happened without Bill.
right, that's true. That's true. And you know, back to, if I may, to my answer to your earlier question, why steam? The steam locomotive, with admitted prejudice, is probably the best public relations media magnet machine that man has ever invented, okay? Because it's loud, it's intricate, all its working parts are visible and fascinating to watch.
It's alive.
Right, it trembles, the ground trembles when it goes by at speed.
That doesn't speak to really good engineering, but it's still good.
So it's a great media magnet, and we wanted all the PR we could get for the Freedom Train and the Chessie Steam Special. So the steam engine pulling it is a natural asset to accomplish that end.
What was Skillman's first name? Do you know?
Huh?
Skillman, the publicist's first name. The head publicist at Chessie.
Sure, sure.
His,
Was his name Skillman?
no.
No,
Was it
no,
Sable?
no.
Larry
He
Sable.
was in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whoever this guy was,
Oh.
who's the head publicist, he's a supporter of the train. He was
Yeah.
in Hayes Watkins' camp.
Okay.
He said it was the best marketing tool and publicity tool that Chessie ever had.
right,
And that's coming from the people that made the Chessie C, which became the most famous corporate trademark up till then
right.
in the country.
I know who you mean. I can't remember his
We're
name
both
now.
getting old.
Public relations guy. Yeah,
We've both been 32 a lot.
right, right.
So, as in terms of what you saw, sadly happening in that happened in Kentucky with 2101. What was that like for you, Ross, to see? Obviously, a series of unfortunate events would say, "Oh, 2101 is probably not going to turn a wheel under its own power again." I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of went through your minds when that
Well,
happened?
it looked terrible because the coal in the tender caught fire because of the heat in the roundhouse fire, and the running skirts on the running boards were warped some. I mean, it looked terrible, burnt all over. But it could have been, we could have reconditioned the engine and got it, restored it back to service. But, you never know. No one could ever tell if there was any deep-seated damage done by the extensive heat, which it sat in for X hours. And maybe just as importantly, it afforded us an excellent opportunity to raise the possibility with Chairman Watkins, could we swap the Freedom Train engine, which has been burnt, we'll fix it up cosmetically so it looks first class, and swap it with you for the 614, which is much more modern, and make a better excursion engine. And he said, yeah, let's do that, and I'll throw $100,000 in the pot to help get it ready, which he did. And so that's how it happened. Could you fix could we have fixed the locomotive? Sure. But would you ever know for sure what damage was done deep-seated? No.
Well, the whole thing was gut-wrenching because we'd spent, by that time, 5 years on the locomotive.
Yeah.
That's your heart
And traveled. Well, see, the love of the engine isn't just about the locomotive, it's what you do with them.
Right.
Having traveled over 54 of the 125 display cities. We had 40% of display cities with that engine through the most densely populated portion of the country.
Right.
There are estimates that the train was seen by 50 million people. You could say 25 or 30 million of them were from the New York metropolitan area in the Northeast. And we were everywhere from Chicago to Portland, Maine, down to Birmingham, Alabama, down to Washington, D.C. So we were on all of that. There's only 2 people left that were on the 2101 from Spreagle to the B&O Museum, and you're sitting with both of them. We've lost all the others. It was gut-wrenching for me. And I agree with what Ross said. We could rebuild the engine. The biggest damage to her was A, cosmetic, and B, accessories from the running boards up, all of which could be replaced. At that time, we still had 2100 with us, and we could have used her as organ donors for 2101. But we had particular issues having to do with the fact that it's a friction-bearing driver that we both wanted to put behind us and advance to what is probably the most technologically advanced steam locomotive ever built in this country.
614 is all roller bearings, is that?
Yeah.
And that's just part of it.
That's right.
It's an extremely sophisticated machine.
Mm-hmm.
It is more sophisticated than any other J running right now.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot.
You read through that as you will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But to have that opportunity presented to us by Mr. Watkins as it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was a pretty quick decision.
That's right.
Tear in the eye, but still a quick decision. And the rest is
Mm-hmm.
history too.
Right.
So kind of a selfish question. I've read David Wardell's The Red Devil and Tales of Other, whatever it's called, from the Age of Steam, and it mentions the Ace 3000 614. What was the whole premise? Like, what were you trying to get out of what was the goal of 614 in that program?
The objective of that month-long test program was partly engineering. The design engineers of the software and the hardware at Foster Wheeler, the boiler company, asked a few key questions which no one had the answer to, such as, when we build the new locomotive, how much of the dynamic augment of the running gear will be absorbed by the boiler barrel and how much by the rigging for the running gear.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, no one kept those kind of measurements from the age of steam that we could find. So that was a question. And there was all kinds of questions about fuel quality. What if we burn lignite versus 14,000 BTU West Virginia coal? There was a whole bunch of questions. And equally, to me, the reason I pushed for it and was glad it happened was I wanted to use the trips with the private car on the train to bring some of the fat cats from the coal industry with us and see if I could get some 6 or 7 figure checks out of them to help us build the prototype.
Yeah.
That part didn't work, but I tried. So it had an engineering component and a fundraising component.
Okay.
And the fundraising component failed. The engineering component, as far as I'm concerned, didn't fail. You know, if you're going to design a fully automated coal-fired steam locomotive, electrically controlled, so that one engineer, just like a diesel, so that one engineer can run 6 of them hooked together, right? Fully self-sufficient. Just think of all the things the software has to have designed into it to answer when it happens on the road, right?
You're thinking caliber of space shuttle technology.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Some guy leaves a 36-inch pipe wrench in the coal and it gets down in the worm, right?
Yeah.
Now, how does the software recognize that the worm is jammed?
Yeah.
And what does it tell the brain to tell the engineer on the front unit, Unit 4 has a blockage in the stoker,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what happens when you're going up a hard pull and the third unit in the 4-unit lash up, the sanders aren't working and the rail is greasy even though he's the third unit back and the lead several units are sanding and she flies up with an aggressive all-power slip, right? What does the software do? How does it take the power away, tell the lead engineer, this is what's happening? You know, I mean,
Has to compensate.
there's 1,000 of those, right?
And all occurring in microseconds.
Yeah, and I wanted some of these brain guys from Foster Wheeler to come out for a few days, freeze their ass off, and see what happens on the railroad with a steam engine when you're pulling your balls out, right?
Right.
So they did. So it was educational.
And selfishly, I have to ask, did you get to meet David Wardell?
Oh, yeah.
gosh, yeah, he was part of the crew.
Yeah, he was part of the crew.
And he
What was
and
that like,
his,
knowing that he
he and
got to
his
do the
own
Red Devil?
godfather, Dante Porto, was probably at the time the preeminent steam engineer
In the world.
Locomotive engineer, but steam architectural design engineer in the world.
Yeah. Part of the problem with David Wardelli is that he tended to want to be the professor, not Dante.
Right.
And Dante was the professor, David was the student, okay? And that didn't rub good with David some, so I guess, I haven't read the book to be honest with you, but they tell me there's a chapter in it where he belittles the 614 program and says it was
To
a
an
rail
extent,
fan.
yeah.
Oh, well, okay. He had no clue about the fundraising piece.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. He did not have a full scope of understanding
No.
of what it was all about.
No.
We knew full well that much of this was for publicity.
That's right.
There was as much telemetry on 614 as has ever been applied to a locomotive anywhere ever.
Right.
They even put an opacity meter on the stack. I said,
Right.
that's not going to make it to Baltimore.
Right.
And it didn't.
Right.
They tried. And they were measuring just about everything. Rod stresses, dynamic augment. We weighed it wheel by wheel to
Right.
measure how much coal the stoker would move in a unit
Right.
of time.
Right.
It was very technical, but it was
Yeah.
also very daunting. But we
And-
never missed a run.
That's right. Thanks to Steve and the crew.
And the crew.
Yes, right. And there was another aspect of the program that was not publicly talked about, and that was that my big money partners at that time, Burlington Northern Railroad, before they merged with Santa Fe, and Chessie System, now known as CSX, and Foster Wheeler, were all dickering about were they going to be willing to divide up between them the $45 million that was going to be needed to build the first prototype. Okay. And my read was that they were all on the positive side of answering that question. But so the 614 program was in part to show them in the executive suite that, yeah, you know, coal-fired steam can still pull a train. Oh, yeah, it still works. Okay, well, now we got to refine it some.
Right.
PR.
Well,
You know.
there are two aspects of that. One, could the engine perform?
Right.
We proved that it could. We couldn't take 150-car coal trains.
Right.
But A, 614 was of a different generation. B, it was a passenger engine. And C, the diesel technology and all this microprocessor control stuff for wheel
Right.
slip and everything else that we did not have in 614.
Right.
But I think the more important thing that we proved is that the engine could survive and perform reliably in that environment.
Right.
And I don't think that we put any more manpower, labor hours on keeping the engine going than they would have 40 years before,
Right.
except for the fact that there were a lot of things that took more of us for us to do because we didn't have the tooling, equipment, machining, and all the rest of it that was standard in every roundhouse in the country
Right.
back then.
Right.
But we did it.
Yeah.
Right.
There's nothing that anybody can take away from us about that. We did it.
Right.
Absolutely. So my last
We
question.
came home with all the parts.
Yeah. And sanity.
No.
No, that was left on the hard. So my last question is, as veterans of previous big steam, what do you see out there currently in the world of steam that excites you, that really kind of gets the old ticker pumping?
Well, this effort right here with 2100.
Yeah.
There's something special about this. In the post-steam era, there is no other class of locomotive that has presented three sisters in the post-steam era. 2100 has run, 2102 is running, 2101 ran more than any of them all over the country.
Right.
The next closest class to that is represented by my other favorite, 765. Two 700s, 759, the Hiring Company, and 765 have run. I don't think that can be said about any other class of locomotive. I am hugely supportive of our friend Gary Bensman and Rich Melvin, who I think is retired from Fort Wayne now, in their preserving 765 for 40 some odd years.
Wow.
And it's still going. They excite me. This group excites me. They have a long way to go, but their hearts are in the right place. And they have the things that Joe Carroll taught me that are essential: dedication, commitment, and perseverance. One of the best educators I ever had in my life, not just on steam, but on life, was Joe Carroll. For that reason, these people are doing it. And I gave him hell out there over some things I saw.
Yeah.
And they're just soaking it all up. And I'm apologizing for being mean when
No,
they're saying, no, we want to hear.
not at all.
They'll get it going. These people have the heart. They will get it going.
Yeah.
It won't be tomorrow, but it's coming.
Yeah, I think Steve's right. This is one of the premier projects currently underway in the country. The other one is the state of Virginia 2 years ago signed a contract with CSX for 2.6 billion with a B dollars to enable them to buy certain lines in within the state of Virginia and give them the right to work with CSX hand in glove going forward to vastly expand the passenger train offerings within the state of Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And part of that deal was they bought the Buckingham Branch Railroad, which runs from near Richmond to Clifton Forge.
Okay.
It's the old CSX Mountain subdivision, and which is where 614 was built to run, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
So the state of Virginia is very passenger train oriented, and in the press release that they issued 2 years ago when it was all announced, they said one of the reasons they were buying the Buckingham Branch Railroad and doing the other passenger expansion programs was for the tourism generation value. So 611 is, as we speak, running down there on a series of trips now.
Oh, wow, I didn't know
Okay.
that. Okay.
Yeah, from Goshen, Virginia to Stanton. It's only 30 miles, but it's up North Mountain, so
Okay.
it gets quite a bit of a pull. And but the more important thing is, in the next 5 years, I think the mainline steam passenger offerings in Virginia will expand greatly, and probably include 614 in the stable going forward. So you'll have 614, 611, and the 1218 all restored and be part of the heritage railroading scene in Virginia.
I wouldn't rule out 2716, which is in Kentucky also.
Yeah, and that's being yeah,
Berkshire, right?
yeah, that's being rebuilt.
CMO K4 Berkshire.
Yeah,
It's a brute.
yeah, yeah.
That's incredible.
I gotta go.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Too, gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all gotta
I got
go.
a date tonight.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Pleasure.